From the archives of the Cedar Valley Gazette, October 17, 1983. In the sleepy hamlet of Black Hollow, Iowa, nestled among cornfields and sagging barns, the autumn of 1983 brought a horror that would scar the town's soul. Black Hollow, a speck of 1,200 souls in Calhoun County, was a place where doors stayed unlocked and neighbors knew each other's secrets. Or so they thought. The disappearance of 14-year-old Clara Ann Peterson on September 29, 1983, shattered that illusion, unraveling a tale of obsession, depravity, and a darkness that festered in the heart of one man, Amos Grundy, a 73-year-old recluse known to locals as Old Man Grundy. What follows is a chronicle of terror, pieced together from police reports, witness accounts, and the trembling words of a girl who survived the unthinkable. Clara Peterson was a quiet, freckled freshman at Black Hollow High, her auburn hair often tucked under a knit cap as she biked the 2 miles from her family's farmhouse to school. Her mother, Ellen Peterson, 38, worked as a seamstress, and her father, Harold, 41, tended their modest dairy herd. Clara was known for her shy smile and her habit of sketching wildflowers in her notebook, a girl who kept to herself but was liked by teachers and classmates alike. On the morning of September 29th, she kissed Ellen goodbye, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and pedaled down County Road 17, her usual route. She never made it to school. By noon, her homeroom teacher, Mrs. Dorothy Klein, 52, called the Peterson home, noting Clara's absence. Ellen, puzzled, checked Clara's room, finding her sketchbook open to a half-drawn sunflower, her bed neatly made. Harold drove the route to school, his pickup kicking up dust, but found no sign of Clara's bike, a blue Schwinn with a wicker basket. By 3 p.m., panic set in, and the Petersons called the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Lyle Carver, 46, a gruff man with a handlebar mustache, arrived with Deputy Tom Hensley, 29, to take their statement. "She's a good kid," Ellen sobbed, clutching Harold's arm. "She wouldn't run off." Carver, chewing a toothpick, nodded but privately suspected a runaway. Black Hollow was too small for foul play, he thought. The town buzzed with worry. Neighbors, farmers like Carl Jensen, 60, and store clerk Betty Morrow, 44, joined a search, combing ditches and woods along County Road 17. Clara's bike was found that evening, its front wheel bent, half hidden in a culvert a mile from school. No blood, no torn clothes, just the bike, its basket empty. "Looked like someone ran her off the road," Jensen told Carver, his voice low. The sheriff's jaw tightened, but he urged calm. "No need to jump to conclusions," he said, though his gut churned. Black Hollow's peace was cracking, and whispers of a stranger, or worse, a neighbor, began to spread. Amos Grundy lived on the edge of town, in a sagging clapboard house surrounded by rusted junk. Car parts, broken plows, and tangled barbed wire. A widower since 1968, when his wife Agnes died in a car accident, Grundy was a ghost to most, seen only when he shuffled into Morrow's general store for canned beans or tobacco. His gaunt frame, tangled white hair, and sunken eyes unnerved locals, who called him Old Man Grundy behind his back. Kids dared each other to knock on his door, whispering tales of a witch who ate trespassers. Betty Morrow, ringing up his purchases, noted his muttering, disjointed phrases about sins and hunger. "Always gave me the creeps," she later told deputies, shivering. Clara had caught Grundy's eye months earlier. In June, she'd biked past his property, sketching a patch of daisies by the road. Grundy, watching from his porch, had called out, "Pretty flowers, girl," his voice raspy. Clara, startled, pedaled away, but Grundy's gaze lingered, his thoughts twisting into something dark. By August, he'd taken to sitting on his porch daily, binoculars in hand, tracking her route. He began collecting scraps, her discarded pencil stub from a ditch, a ribbon snagged on a fence. His obsession grew, fed by a warped hunger, a belief that Clara's purity could sate a craving he'd buried since Agnes's death. In his cellar, a dirt-floored room lit by a single bulb, he sharpened knives and scrawled recipes in a tattered notebook, his mind unraveling into madness. On September 29th, Grundy acted. As Clara biked past his property, he stepped into the road, waving a rag as if signaling distress. "Help, miss," he croaked, his voice feigned. Clara, cautious but kind, slowed her bike. Grundy lunged, his wiry strength surprising, knocking her into the ditch. Her scream was brief, muffled by his hand. He dragged her to his truck, hidden behind a barn, and bound her wrists with twine. Her bike he tossed into the culvert, its wheel bent under his boot. In his cellar, Clara awoke, her head throbbing, the air thick with earth and decay. Grundy loomed, his eyes gleaming. "You're special," he muttered, sharpening a blade. "Gonna make you part of me." For 2 days, Clara was trapped, her wrists raw, her pleas ignored. Grundy fed her stale bread, muttering about preparing her, his recipes a chilling litany of cuts and spices. On October 1st, his madness peaked. He held her left hand, his grip iron, and sliced off her pinky finger with a cleaver, the act swift but deliberate. Clara's scream echoed, her blood pooling on the dirt floor. Grundy wrapped the finger in cloth, his voice calm. "First taste," he said, placing it in a jar. Clara, dazed with pain, curled into a ball, her hope fading as Grundy's footsteps faded up the stairs. The sheriff's investigation, sluggish at first, gained traction. On September 30th, Deputy Hensley interviewed Betty Morrow, who recalled Grundy's odd purchases: twine, bleach, a new cleaver. "Didn't think much of it," she said, her voice uneasy. Carl Jensen reported seeing Grundy's truck near the culvert the day Clara vanished, its tailgate down. Carver, skeptical but pressed by Ellen's daily calls, visited Grundy's property on October 1st. The old man was evasive, his house reeking of mildew, but he allowed a cursory search, no cellar mentioned. "Just an old man," Grundy rasped, his eyes darting. Carver left, unconvinced but lacking cause for a warrant. Clara's fate hung by a thread, her survival a flicker in Black Hollow's growing dread. The town's innocence was unraveling, and the truth lay buried in Grundy's cellar, waiting to be unearthed. The disappearance of Clara Ann Peterson on September 29th, 1983, had plunged Black Hollow, Iowa, into a fog of fear, its 1,200 residents grappling with a mystery that defied their small-town trust. By October 2nd, 3 days after the 14-year-old freshman vanished on her bike, the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office was under pressure, its initial theory of a runaway crumbling. Clara's bent schwinn, found in a culvert on County Road 17, hinted at foul play, and whispers of a predator, perhaps a neighbor, spread through the cornfields. At the heart of the horror was Amos Grundy, a 73-year-old recluse whose twisted obsession had led to an unthinkable act. The abduction of Clara, now trapped in his cellar, her pinky finger severed in a ritual of madness. The Cedar Valley Gazette, piecing together police reports, witness accounts, and survivor testimony, continues its chronicle of Black Hollow's darkest hour. In the damp earthen cellar of Grundy's decaying house, Clara Peterson lay on a tattered blanket, her wrists chafed raw by twine, her left hand throbbing where her pinky once was. The wound, crudely bandaged with a rag, pulsed with pain, the dirt floor stained dark from her blood. The air was thick with mildew and the sour reek of Grundy's unwashed body, his presence a constant terror. By October 2nd, Clara had been captive for 3 days, her world reduced to a 10 by 12-foot prison lit by a flickering bulb. Grundy, his gaunt frame hunched, visited hourly, his sunken eyes gleaming with a feverish hunger. "You're chosen," he muttered, stirring a pot of broth on a hot plate, its contents mercifully unclear. Clara, her voice hoarse from pleading, curled tighter, her mind clinging to memories of her mother's voice, her father's laugh, the sunflowers she'd sketched. Grundy's madness was a labyrinth of delusion. His notebook, a tattered relic on a crate, held scrawled recipes, cuts of meat, spices, methods to preserve the soul. He spoke to Clara as if she were Agnes, his wife, dead since 1968, his words a jumble of love and hunger. "She didn't understand," he rasped, sharpening a knife. "You will." The severed finger, stored in a jar of brine on a shelf, was his offering, a ritual he believed would bind Clara to him. He fed her scraps, moldy bread, tepid water, keeping her weak but alive, his plans for a final meal looming. Clara, her freckled face pale, whispered prayers, her hope a fragile thread against the cellar's darkness. Above ground, Black Hollow churned with unease. Sheriff Lyle Carver, his toothpick-chewing calm fraying, faced mounting pressure from Clara's parents, Ellen and Harold Peterson. Ellen, her eyes red from sleepless nights, called the sheriff's office daily, her voice breaking. "She's out there, Lyle! Find her!" Harold, his dairy work abandoned, scoured fields with neighbors like Carl Jensen and Betty Morrow, their flashlights cutting through the dusk. The discovery of Clara's bike had shifted the town's mood. Fear replaced gossip, and doors now locked at night. At Morrow's general store, Betty whispered to customers about Grundy's odd purchases: twine, bleach, a cleaver. "Always muttering," she told Deputy Tom Hensley on October 2nd, her hands trembling. "Something about hunger." Hensley, younger and keener than Carver, took note. On October 3rd, he revisited Grundy's property, a mile from the culvert where Clara's bike was found. The old man's yard was a junkyard maze. Rusted tractors, wire coils, a broken plow. Grundy, leaning on a cane, met Hensley at the gate, his voice raspy. "Ain't seen no girl," he said, his eyes darting to the house. Hensley, noting the bleach smell wafting from the porch, asked to look around. Grundy shrugged, allowing a glance inside the cluttered living room. Stale air, yellowed curtains, no sign of Clara. The cellar door, hidden behind a stack of crates, went unnoticed. "Just an old man," Grundy repeated, his lips twitching. Hensley left, uneasy but lacking grounds for a search warrant, his report to Carver brief. "Grundy's weird, but nothing solid." Carver, swamped with leads, sightings of strangers, a drifter near the highway, was skeptical. "He's just a hermit," he told Hensley, spitting tobacco. But Ellen's pleas and Jensen's tip about Grundy's truck near the culvert gnawed at him. On October 4th, Carver interviewed Clara's classmates, including Jenny Walsh, 15, who recalled Clara mentioning an old man watching her bike past his house in August. "She said he creeped her out," Jenny told Carver, twisting her braid. The sheriff's gut twisted. Grundy's name kept surfacing, a specter in Black Hollow's haze. In the cellar, Clara's world was a nightmare of pain and dread. Grundy's visits grew erratic, his mutterings darker. On October 4th, he knelt beside her, his breath sour, and stroked her hair. "Tomorrow's special," he said, his knife glinting. "You'll be perfect." Clara, her strength fading, forced herself to speak, her voice a whisper. "Why me?" Grundy's eyes clouded. "You're pure, like Agnes. Gotta make it right." He left, locking the cellar, his footsteps creaking above. Clara, tears streaking her dirt-smeared face, tugged at the twine, her raw wrists bleeding. She found a loose nail in the dirt, its edge dull but sharp enough to saw slowly at her bonds, her hope a flicker against despair. The investigation gained momentum. On October 5th, Betty Morrow called Hensley, her voice urgent. "Grundy bought more bleach yesterday," she said, "and a big sack of salt. Looked nervous." Hensley, cross-referencing Jensen's truck sighting, pushed Carver for a warrant. "He's hiding something," Hensley insisted, his face taut. Carver, reluctant but cornered, contacted Judge Harlan Tate, 62, who demanded more evidence. That evening, Carl Jensen found a scrap of Clara's knit cap, torn and muddy, in a ditch 200 yards from Grundy's property. "It's hers!" Ellen sobbed, clutching it. Carver's toothpick snapped. Grundy was no longer a hunch. In Black Hollow, fear tightened its grip. Parents kept children indoors, and the general store buzzed with rumors. Grundy as a killer, a cannibal, a devil. Betty Morrow locked her doors, her sleep haunted by Grundy's muttering. Harold Peterson, his face haggard, searched daily, his voice raw as he called Clara's name in the fields. Ellen, praying at the Methodist church, lit candles, her hope dwindling. Grundy, sensing the town's eyes, stayed inside, his binoculars untouched, his cellar a secret tomb. Clara, sawing at the twine with the nail, felt time slipping, her pain a constant scream, her survival hinging on a fraying thread. By October 6th, 1983, Black Hollow, Iowa, was a town gripped by dread, its 1,200 residents haunted by the disappearance of Clara Ann Peterson, a 14-year-old freshman last seen biking to school on September 29th. 8 days had passed, and the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office, led by Sheriff Lyle Carver, faced a mounting crisis. Clara's bent schwinn, a torn knit cap, and whispers of a local predator had shattered the hamlet's trust. In a dirt-floored cellar, Clara endured a nightmare. Her pinky finger severed by Amos Grundy, a 73-year-old recluse whose warped obsession had spiraled into depravity. As the town searched, Grundy's darkness deepened, and the clock ticked toward a horror that would sear Black Hollow's soul. The Cedar Valley Gazette continues its chronicle, drawn from police reports, witness accounts, and the survivors' trembling words. In the suffocating gloom of Grundy's cellar, Clara Peterson clung to life. Her body curled on a filthy blanket, her left hand a throbbing wound wrapped in a blood-crusted rag. The air was heavy with damp earth and the rancid stench of Grundy's sweat, the single bulb casting jagged shadows. By October 6th, Clara had been captive for a week, her wrists raw from twine, her strength sapped by hunger and pain. Grundy's visits were a torment. His gaunt frame, tangled white hair, and fevered eyes loomed as he muttered about purity and feasts. The jar on his shelf, holding her severed pinky in murky brine, was a constant horror, his first offering in a ritual Clara couldn't fathom. She whispered her mother's name, Ellen, her voice barely audible, her hope fraying against the cellar's weight. Grundy's mind was a abyss of delusion. His notebook, its pages yellowed and curling, detailed grotesque recipes, boils, roasts, methods to capture the spirit. He spoke to Clara as if she were his late wife, Agnes, his voice a chilling blend of tenderness and menace. "You'll make it right," he rasped, stirring a pot on a hot plate, its contents a grayish sludge. On October 6th, he knelt beside her, his knife glinting, and traced her cheek. "Soon you'll be ready," he said, his breath sour. Clara, her body trembling, clutched the loose nail she'd been using to saw at her bonds, its dull edge her only weapon. She'd loosened the twine, but not enough to break free, her movement slow to avoid Grundy's notice. Each creak of his footsteps above was a countdown, her survival a desperate gamble. Above Black Hollow was a cauldron of fear and suspicion. Sheriff Carver, his toothpick habit replaced by chain smoking, faced relentless pressure from Clara's parents, Ellen and Harold Peterson. Ellen, her face hollowed by grief, haunted the sheriff's office, clutching Clara's sunflower sketch. "She's alive, Lyle!" she pleaded, her voice raw. Harold, his dairy farm neglected, joined nightly searches with neighbors like Carl Jensen and Betty Morrow, their lanterns sweeping cornfields. The torn knit cap, found near Grundy's property, had ignited panic. Doors locked, children shadowed by parents, the general store a hub of grim whispers. "It's one of us," Jensen told Betty, his voice low. "Someone we know." Deputy Tom Hensley, driven by instinct, zeroed in on Amos Grundy. On October 6th, he returned to Grundy's property with Carver, armed with Jensen's truck sighting and Betty's tip about the cleaver and bleach. The old man's house reeked of decay, its junk-strewn yard a labyrinth. Grundy, his cane tapping, met them at the door, his eyes darting. "Told you ain't seen no girl," he growled, blocking the entrance. Hensley, noting a faint metallic scent, bleach or worse, pushed to search inside. Grundy allowed a glance, cluttered rooms, no cellar mentioned, the door hidden behind crates. "Just an old man," Grundy repeated, his lips twitching. Carver, skeptical, pulled Hensley back. "No warrant, no search," he muttered. But Hensley's unease grew, his notebook filling with Grundy's name. The investigation stumbled forward. On October 7th, Hensley interviewed Clara's friend Jenny Walsh, who recalled Clara's fear of an old man watching her bike route. "She avoided his house," Jenny said, her voice trembling. Betty Morrow called again, reporting Grundy's absence from the store since Clara vanished. "He's hiding," she whispered, her hands shaking. Carver, pressured by Judge Harlan Tate for evidence, sent Hensley to canvass Grundy's neighbors. Old Mrs. Elsie Tate, 78, lived a quarter-mile away, her farmhouse overlooking Grundy's land. "Saw his truck moving late September 29th, she told Hensley, her voice frail. "Heard a thump, like something heavy. Hensley's pulse quickened. The culvert was nearby, Clara's bike found that day. In the cellar, Clara's fight for survival grew desperate. On October 7th, Grundy's mood darkened, his mutterings frantic. "Time's close," he said, sharpening his cleaver, his eyes fixed on her. Clara, her wrists bleeding from the nail's slow work, loosened the twine further, her movements hidden by the blanket. She feigned weakness, her voice a whimper, buying time. Grundy, distracted, left to fetch water, his footsteps creaking. Clara sawed faster, the twine fraying, her pain a distant scream. She freed one wrist, her heart pounding, but Grundy's return froze her. She tucked the nail under the blanket, her body limp, her hope a razor's edge. Black Hollow's fear turned to paranoia. At the Methodist church, Ellen lit candles, her prayers a whisper as neighbors like Dorothy Klein offered Hollow comfort. Harold's searches grew frantic, his voice cracking as he shouted Clara's name into the fields. Betty Morrow stopped serving Grundy's usual customers, her sleep plagued by his hunger talk. Jensen, patrolling with a shotgun, eyed Grundy's property from afar, his gut screaming. Carver, chain smoking through sleepless nights, faced a town on edge, his doubts about Grundy hardening. "Get me something solid," he told Hensley, his voice rough, "or we're chasing ghosts." On October 8th, a break came. "Mrs." Tate called Hensley, her voice urgent. "Saw smoke from Grundy's chimney last night," she said. "Smelled awful, not wood, something else." Hensley, cross-referencing the truck sighting and Clara's cap, pushed Carver for a warrant. "It's him," he insisted, his face taut. Carver, cornered by Ellen's tears and Tate's tip, contacted Judge Tate, who agreed to a limited warrant. Grounds only, no house entry. As Hensley prepared, Grundy sat in his cellar, his knife poised, Clara's frayed twine a secret he didn't see. The town held its breath, the horror of Black Hollow's butcher inching toward its terrible dawn. On October 9th, 1983, Black Hollow, Iowa stood on the precipice of horror. Its 1,200 residents consumed by the 9-day disappearance of Clara Ann Peterson, a 14-year-old freshman last seen biking to school on September 29th. The Calhoun County Sheriff's Office, led by Sheriff Lyle Carver, faced a town unraveling, its trust shattered by a bent Schwinn, a torn knit cap, and whispers of a local monster. In a dirt-floored cellar, Clara endured a nightmare, her pinky finger severed by Amos Grundy, a 73-year-old recluse whose twisted hunger had birthed a depravity that would scar Black Hollow forever. As the sheriff closed in, the truth emerged in a raid that shook the hamlet to its core. The Cedar Valley Gazette concludes its chronicle, drawn from police reports, witness accounts, and the survivors' haunted words. In the suffocating darkness of Amos Grundy's cellar, Clara Peterson lay trembling on a blood-stained blanket, her wrists half freed by a dull nail she'd used to saw through her twine bonds. The air was thick with the stench of earth and decay, the single bulb casting grotesque shadows. By October 9th, Clara had been captive for 10 days, her body gaunt from starvation, her left hand a searing wound where her pinky once was, the rag bandage crusted with dirt. Grundy's jaw, holding her severed finger in cloudy brine, sat on a shelf, a grim relic of his ritual. His visits were a descent into madness. His gaunt frame, wild white hair, and fevered eyes loomed as he muttered about feasts and Agnes. Clara, her freckled face ghostly, clung to a sliver of hope, her nail hidden, her mind fixed on her mother's voice. Grundy's delusion was a fever pitch. On October 9th, he prepared his final meal, his tattered notebook open to a recipe scrawled in jagged ink. Boil, season, cleanse the soul. He spoke to Clara as his dead wife, his voice a chilling croon. "Tonight you're whole," he said, his cleaver glinting as he stirred a pot on a hot plate, its contents a sickly gray. Clara, her strength nearly gone, slowed her breathing, feigning unconsciousness. She'd freed one wrist, the twine loose but not off, her nail poised to cut the rest. Grundy, lost in his ritual, hummed a hymn, his knife inches from her. Clara's heart hammered. She needed time, a distraction, anything to survive the night. Above ground, Black Hollow was a powder keg. Sheriff Carver, his chain smoking a haze, faced a town on the brink. Ellen Peterson, Clara's mother, was a ghost of herself. Her daily pleas, "Find her, Lyle," a knife in his gut. Harold Peterson, his face etched with despair, searched fields with neighbors like Carl Jensen and Betty Morrow, their hope dwindling. The knit cap, Grundy's truck sightings, and Mrs. Elsie Tate's report of foul-smelling smoke had pinned the sheriff's focus on Amos Grundy. Deputy Tom Hensley, driven by instinct, had built a case. Betty's tip about Grundy's cleaver, Jensen's culvert sighting, Jenny Walsh's story of Clara's fear, and Tate's smoke. On October 8th, Judge Harlan Tate granted a limited warrant, grounds only. But Hensley pushed for more, his voice urgent. "It's Grundy," he told Carver, his notebook trembling. "We're out of time." On October 9th, the break came. Mrs. Tate called Hensley at dawn, her voice quaking. "Grundy's burning something again," she said. "Smells like meat, but wrong." Hensley, cross-referencing the cap and smoke, convinced Carver for a full warrant. "If Clara's there, we're late," he said, his face pale. Carver, his toothpick gone, contacted Judge Tate, who approved a house search by noon. At 3 p.m., Carver, Hensley, and 2 deputies, Ed Walsh and Mike Gorman, rolled up to Grundy's property, their sirens off to avoid spooking him. The junk-strewn yard was silent. Grundy's truck parked, a thin wisp of smoke curling from his chimney. Carver's gut churned. This was no ghost hunt. In the cellar, Clara sensed a shift. Grundy's hymn faltered, his head cocking at a distant sound, tires on gravel. "Stay quiet," he hissed, grabbing his cleaver, his eyes wild. Clara, her wrist nearly free, sawed faster, the twine snapping as Grundy climbed the stairs. She yanked her hands free, her body screaming with pain, and stumbled to her feet, the nail her only weapon. The cellar door creaked shut, Grundy's lock clicking, trapping her. She pounded the wood, her voice a raw scream, her hope flaring. Someone was near. Culmination. The raid was chaos. Carver kicked the front door, his revolver drawn, Hensley behind with a shotgun. "Grundy! Sheriff's office!" Carver bellowed, the house reeking of bleach and rot. Grundy in the kitchen swung his cleaver, his scream feral. Walsh tackled him, the blade grazing Gorman's arm, blood spattering. Grundy, wiry but frail, was cuffed, his eyes burning as he spat. "She's mine!" Hensley, hearing a faint cry, found the cellar door behind crates, its lock rusted. He pried it open, the stench hitting like a wall. Blood, earth, decay. Clara curled in the corner, sobbed, her hand bandaged, her face pale. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice breaking. Hensley carried her out, her body light as a child's, the jar on the shelf catching his eye. A pinky, preserved, a grotesque trophy. The rescue stunned Black Hollow. Clara was rushed to Calhoun County Hospital, her wound infected, her body weak but alive. Doctors confirmed the amputation, the cut clean, her recovery uncertain. Ellen and Harold, sobbing, held her, their relief tempered by horror. Grundy, arrested, rambled about Agnes and offerings, his notebook a damning ledger of madness. The cellar revealed his tools, knives, a hot plate, blood-stained rags, each item a testament to his depravity. Carver, chain-smoking outside, faced a town in shock, his toothpick days gone. "We were too slow," he told Hensley, his voice hollow. Black Hollow reeled. Betty Morrow closed her store, haunted by Grundy's purchases. Carl Jensen burned his lantern, unable to search again. Ellen Peterson, clutching Clara's sunflower sketch, vowed to heal her daughter, her faith shaken but unbroken. Clara, her hand scarred, her spirit bruised, spoke softly to nurses, her survival a fragile light. Grundy, charged with kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder, awaited trial in a county cell, his silence a final curse. The town, its innocence lost, locked its doors, the name Butcher of Black Hollow, a whisper that lingered in the cornfields. In the shadow of this terror, Clara's courage, her nail, her will, stands as a beacon. Her story, etched in Black Hollow's wounds, calls to us across the years. Share it, carry it, let it burn through the darkness, a light for every soul who dares to survive.